Why do you like Amy Crabclaw so much when she was a cop, just like Kamala Harris? No, I hate Amy Klobuchar, and I certainly don't like Kamala Harris. The only candidate I like outside of Bernie Sanders, kind of, is Elizabeth Warren. Okay, first and foremost, it's called Why You Shouldn't Support Kamala Harris for the Upcoming 2020 Election, a thread. Okay? Starting with the fact that she is a cop. Okay? This photo, cop. Kamala Harris. Let's take a look. Hasan tonight on HBO. All right, let's take a look at what Kamala Harris has done in the past. Number one, she supported the law that forces schools to turn undocumented students over to ICE, separating them from their parents. And then she lied about, she lied and claimed that she didn't know that that was what that law was supposed to do, despite the fact that she literally gave a speech at Stanford defending this controversial Gavin Newsom era law. Number two, she supported and funded a bill that would criminalize truancy, disproportionately harming single-parent households, the poor, families of color, and homeless mothers. You guys all remember this? We talked about this. Lock innocent black mothers up for truancy. Kamala Harris, she did that. Kamala Harris straight up continued to defend that truancy. She continued to describe how she'd brought charges against a single homeless mother of three who was working 2 jobs because her children were truant. And that was, in her mind, a success story.
Created what we call the DA mediation program, where we assigned prosecutors to go and sit with the administrators and principals when they met with all the parents. And frankly, you know the prosecutors in my office who volunteered to do this? My homicide prosecutors, my gang prosecutors. And they went over there, and I said, when you go over there, look really mean. And so they did, and invariably the parents said, well, who's the mean-looking dude? And the principal would say, well, that's someone that mean DA Kamala Harris sent over here because she said she's going to start prosecuting you if we can't work this out. And through that initiative, we found cases like the case of the woman who was by herself, raising her 3 children, holding down 2 jobs, and homeless. She just needed some help. But by shining this infrared spotlight of public safety on the fact that her children aren't in school, we were able to figure that out, get her access to services that exist.
Guys, we sent a bunch of fucking horrifying looking dudes to scare the shit out of a homeless mother of 3 who was barely making ends meet. And guess what? Through that horrifying process, which is the only way we could have figured out that, you know, she can get the help she needs.
And through that process, the attendance of her children improved. We dismissed the charges against her. And overall, we've improved attendance for this population in San Francisco by 20%.
Anyway, like I said, using a Gestapo force to threaten homeless people and talking about that as a resounding success. Very cool, Kamala Harris. Very cool, Kamala Harris. All right, here's a video of Kamala Harris talking about how criminal justice reformers are unrealistic and ideological.
Friends like Eva Patterson. Okay, so I say with all love and warmth that part of the concern also for people who are progressive thinking and liberal-minded, or just progressive thinking in terms of just fix it, is that we all have these posters in our closet that is attached to a stick that we sometimes will cart out when we're talking about criminal justice policy and those statistics that you first heard when we opened it up, incarceration, and we run around with these signs, build more schools, less jails. Build more schools, less jails. And we walk around everywhere. Build more schools. We protest. Build more schools, less jails. Put money into education, not prisons. There's a fundamental problem with that approach, in my opinion. And it's this. I agree with that conceptually. But you have not addressed the reason I have 3 padlocks on my front door. So part of the discussion about reform of criminal justice policy has to be an acknowledgement that crime does occur, and especially when it is violent crime and serious crime, there should be a broad consensus that there should be serious and severe and swift consequence to crime.
Still, Kamala Harris, it's kind of crazy. This liberal notion that we want to build schools, not prisons, doesn't address the real problem that violent crime does happen. Thanks, Kamala Harris. I guess you need to be a draconian prosecutor for us to understand that crime does actually, indeed, as a matter of fact, happen. Fixing socioeconomic problems and increasing opportunities in education does tend to lower crime statistically, but I guess not in her world. Doesn't matter. But perhaps the gravest offense of Kamala Harris is when she doesn't choose to be a cop when she should be a cop. Now, this is something that I've talked about like probably a year ago. It's something that I had forgotten. Until recently. That time when Kamala Harris declined to prosecute Steven Mnuchin after his bank's predatory lending and foreclosure fraud broke the law over 1,000 times and ruined the lives of thousands of homeowners. Now, this was a David Dan investigative reporting from The Intercept. The Treasury nominee, Steve Mnuchin's bank accused of widespread misconduct in a leaked memo. And Kamala Harris just happened to find a rehabilitative justice streak in her. Remember, chat? Because earlier we were talking about poor people and violent crime. When it comes to scaring the shit out of homeless black moms, Kamala Harris is there to use the police force in all of its brutality. But when it comes to a dipshit like Steven Mnuchin, like an actual villain like Steven Mnuchin, well then Kamala Harris has different opinions. Okay? In the memo, the leaders of the state attorney general's consumer law section said that they had uncovered evidence suggestive of widespread misconduct in a year-long investigation. In a detailed 22-page request, they identified over 1,000 legal violations in the small subsection of One West loans they were able to examine, and they recommended that Attorney General Kamala Harris file a civil enforcement action against the Pasadena-based bank. They even wrote a sample They even wrote up a sample legal complaint seeking injunctive relief and millions of dollars in penalties, but Harris's office, without any explanation, declined to prosecute. Now, hold on. I mean, what reason could there be for Kamala Harris not to prosecute Steven Mnuchin for over 1,000 different infringements? That's so crazy. Oh, wait. He literally donated to his campaign later. Harris was the only 2016 Senate Democratic candidate to get cash from Steven Mnuchin. The only 2016 Senate Democratic candidate to get cash. Now, to be fair, she did vote against him for Treasury Secretary, but, she did get that sweet campaign dono. So, good on her. Kamala Harris spent years jailing disproportionately black, non-violent cannabis users. Now, this is incredibly interesting, especially because Kamala Harris admits that she is Jamaican, and also because of her Jamaican heritage, she of course smoked weed. Of course, she loved smoking weed in college. She lied on a radio show about smoking the ganj, right? At a time when she listened to like the Snoop Dogg album, which wasn't even or was it Tupac? It wasn't Snoop Dogg, it was Tupac. I can't remember. I'm gonna find this right now. She lied about fucking smoking weed, basically. But the best part about Kamala Harris lying about smoking weed wasn't the fact that she lied about smoking weed in college, but her fucking dad absolutely destroying her, dude. Destroying her. Okay, so Kamala Harris made headlines last week when she joked in a radio interview that, of course, she smoked marijuana in her younger days, despite the fact that I just mentioned that she was locking up African Americans disproportionately for the crime of smoking marijuana, okay, for smoking weed. When asked in a radio interview, she said, "Half of my family's from Jamaica. Are you kidding me?" But the crack didn't go over well with at least one Jamaican, Donald J. motherfucking Harris, her father. The elder Harris, who also happens to be a emeritus professor of economics at Stanford University, who is a Kingston-based Jamaican, he sent a statement to a Kingston-based Jamaica Global Online. He himself is also Jamaican. I don't know if he's from Kingston. He said, "My dear departed grandmothers, whose extraordinary legacy I described in a recent essay on the website, as well as my deceased parents, must be turning in their grave right now to see their family's name, reputation, and proud Jamaican identity being connected in any way, jokingly or not, with the fraudulent stereotype of a pot-smoking joy seeker and in the pursuit of identity politics," he wrote. Her dad, Kamala Harris's dad, who is a Marxist professor, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if he's actually Marxist, but he is an economics professor at Stanford. He said, "Speaking for myself and my immediate Jamaican family, we wish to categorically dissociate ourselves from this travesty." Kamala Harris's campaign had no comment. Kamala Harris opposed reforming California's 3 strikes law, which is the only one in the country to impose life sentences for minor felonies and incarcerates black people at 12 times the rate as white people. 12 times the rate. Kamala Harris did not oppose the law 1 time. She did not oppose the law 2 times. She opposed the law 3 times. There's a New York Times feature on her being a top cop in the era of Black Lives Matter. Her job is to uphold the current law, period. She isn't a judge. Why are you assigning her omnipotent levels of free will? Like, what the fuck, was she just supposed to let them out personally, or personally change the law, like herself, like a dictator? Yes. As an attorney general, you have a tremendous amount of leniency. You don't have to fucking push for. You don't have to actually push for the threat of jailing black mothers with the crime of truancy. That is absolutely a personal opinion that you have. There are plenty of progressive attorney generals. There are plenty of progressive district attorneys. As a matter of fact, one in they have an insane amount of discretion.
You can't have an opinion.
What you're saying is completely false. In many ways, I'm not gonna lie, Kamala Harris and Cory Booker are like at the exact opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to the reformation of the criminal justice system. Cory Booker has a pretty good track record when it comes to his takes on the criminal justice system. He might be a fucking absolute bootlicker of the highest order when it comes to big pharma, which apparently he seems to have reformed his perspective on. He might be a total crony to the Wall Street masters, right? But he has always had a long career of criminal justice reform. That is like one area where Cory Booker absolutely excels in. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, is literally the opposite of Cory Booker in that regard and has a very long history of not excelling. Anyway, Kamala Harris protected serial child rapists by refusing to prosecute in the Catholic Church sex abuse scandal. As the San Francisco District Attorney, Kamala Harris's office stopped cooperating with victims of the Catholic Church child abuse.
Career has been based on an understanding, one, that as a prosecutor, my duty was to seek and make sure that the most vulnerable and voiceless among us are protected, and that is why I have personally prosecuted.
Should I put this in my pocket? Yeah. It's not outside.
I have personally prosecuted violent crime that includes rape, child molestation, and homicide, and I have also worked my entire career to reform the criminal justice.
I was born and raised Catholic. All my relatives were Catholic. I believed in God. That was my life. I was accepted to Salesian High School, which to me was an honor. Almost immediately after I got to the high school, I was befriended by the vice principal, Father Steve Whelan. The very first incident, I was playing pool and he masturbated in front of me. And I was scared to death. I stood there frozen. I was just a little 70.
Okay, you know what? Let's maybe move past it. Okay, so the vice president molested him, and
in 2004, Kamala Harris was elected. Everything just went down the tubes. I started out by writing a letter asking for some help or some accessibility. to the file. I didn't get any response. So then we made posters and started putting them all over the city, and we got no response. Several media members were also asking for files and stuff, and they were getting nothing. So in 2010, there was a big article in San Francisco Weekly, and they were pestering her office, and then what they got was this false statement that they were protecting victims. It's just a flat-out insult. She could have redacted the names, blacked out the names and left them out. Everything he did to gather information and to try and prosecute and go after them disappeared and went the other way. She shielded and protected them, and we were floored at what happened.
Damn, good one, Kamala. But protecting the Catholic Church, even in instances where they raped little children, is one thing. Kamala Harris also, showed her Christian values when she denied a transgender inmate health care and endangered trans women by forcing them into men's prisons. Subject of discussion on the Ross Show, a bill that is up in the California Senate now, against all the things that Kamala Harris had done in the past. Oh, by the way, just for the record, the incarcerated transgender women's that Kamala Harris sent to men's prisons got raped. Just, you know. Kamala Harris also stood by silently as $730 million was spent on moving inmates to for-profit prisons. Mercury News editorial sent out a release saying Kamala Harris needs to tackle the prison standoff, asking, where is Kamala Harris when we need her? The state attorney general, a rising star in the Democratic Party, ran for office in 2010, arguing persuasively that the $11 billion Californians spent on their prison system was being largely wasted. But where is that Kamala Harris now? You know, California has the highest recidivism rate in the nation, with the 65% of its inmates returning to prison within 3 years of release. It boggles the mind that the governor now wants to take $730 million of the state's precious reserves over 2 years to move inmates to private prisons and vacant county jail cells in order to deal with the Supreme Court order to reduce overcrowding. Harris ought to be calling him on it, especially since Senate President Pro Tem Darrell Steinberg has a better plan that's in line with her thinking and would avoid releasing hundreds of prisoners to California streets, a prospect Brown clearly sees as a potential public safety and political nightmare. Steinberg would give counties $200 million to expand mental health and drug programs for criminal offenders with the goal of preventing crime and reducing the number of people who wind up in prison. We can't build or rent our way out of overcrowded prisons, Steinberg said. And he's right. At some point, we have to invest in preventing crime and recidivism. But remember, according to Kamala Harris, people are talking about building schools and talking about how we shouldn't have so many prisons. But as Kamala Harris said, I still got to put 3 padlocks in my door. Violent crime is going to keep happening. Thanks, Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris voted 2 different times to block federal funding for abortions. Technically, Elizabeth Warren also did. Michael Bennet did. Cory Booker did. Kristen Gillibrand did. Amy Klobuchar did. Beto O'Rourke did. Eric Swalwell did. Bernie Sanders was the only one who voted no. To be fair, it was a part of a spending package, so the rest of the reason why every single person has voted on the Hyde Amendment at some point. She voted to give Trump increased military spending. She accepted thousands of dollars of campaign funds from Donald and Ivanka Trump multiple times. It was literally big dollar donors, including Donald Trump, which fueled Kamala Harris's political rise in California. Even though asked last week if she believes that President Donald Trump is a racist, California Senator Kamala Harris told The Root, I don't think you can reach any other conclusion. But I guess back in September 2011, it was okay to get $5,000, despite the fact that that $5,000 came from a guy who was already on cable news promoting a conspiracy theory that President Barack Obama was born in Kenya and not in the United States, something that everybody knew was because it was racist, because Donald Trump was a racist. Harris made a donation in 2015 of $6,000 that Trump had contributed to a nonprofit that advocates for civil human rights. In 2015, 4 years later, a year after she had won her re-election for Attorney General, and she was launching her run for Senate. Just a quick tidbit. In her 2016 Senate race, Harris raised just 15% of contributions from donors giving less than $200. This is a person, this is very important. To me, aside from her like long track record of being the biggest cop ever, I would say that the fact that only 15% of her contributions came from donors giving less than $200 is really fucking damaging. If you want to know who's bought out a politician, look at who their donors are. Look at how many of their donors are corporations and super PACs, and how much of her funding comes from small, independent campaign contributions. Kamala Harris is a corporate Democrat. Precisely why, before all the other contenders came out, she was seen as the next Hillary Clinton. So remember that. Kamala Harris was also terrible for sex workers. She claimed that she wants to decriminalize sex work, and yet she was a large backer of Sesta and Fosta. She took down the back pages and numerous other websites that sex workers, independent sex workers, use to protect themselves and ensure that they can have safe transactions. Websites that sex workers use to communicate with one another to ensure that the clientele aren't abusive or murderous in some instances. Kamala Harris took that down. But yet, when she's running for president, she's talking about decriminalizing sex work. Very odd. She also oversaw people being charged for prostitution without even agreeing to sex. She refused to investigate Herbalife. That was a cool one. Kamala Harris is accused of letting company exploiting Latinos off the hook, which is a very weird title, but Latino activists are criticizing Kamala Harris for failing to investigate multi-level marketing company Herbalife while she served as California Attorney General and maintained several personal connections to the company. For the record, for those of you who don't know, Herbalife is a multi-level marketing scheme. Studies show that 99.9% of distributors who join the companies make little to no profit, even as the companies rake in billions of dollars in profit. Herbalife, in particular, has been accused of targeting and exploiting the Latino community. Herbalife's records indicate that at least 60% of the company's distributors are Spanish-speaking Hispanics, and the total number of Hispanics might be as high as 80% when bilingual and English speakers are included. In 2013, the League of United Latin American Citizens and 4 other groups urged Harris to investigate Herbalife for deceptive business practices. Now documents obtained by Yahoo News indicate that San Diego office of the California Attorney General agreed and wrote a memorandum asking Harris for resources to investigate the company in 2015. Harris never gave a reason for declining the request. But Yahoo News notes that around that same time, Harris received the first of 3 donations from Heather Podesta. You might remember Podesta, whose ex-husband Tony Podesta runs a powerful lobbying firm that represented Herbalife at this time. Tony Podesta, does that ring a bell? Tony Podesta, who didn't go to jail, despite the fact that the other people in that lobbying firm went to jail. No, that's John Podesta, is the quote-unquote pedophile cheese pizza guy. Tony Podesta is the brother that worked alongside motherfucking Paul Manafort. The company that they're mentioning here, I'm fairly certain, is the company that he ran with Paul Manafort. Emails give new detail about Mercury Podesta's role in Manafort's lobbying. A letter released by the Justice Department on Thursday appears to show that lobbyists associated with Paul Manafort knew he was working at the direction of the Ukrainian government, even though lobbyists did not register with the U.S. government as foreign agents until years later. Documents suggest Tony Podesta, the chairman of the Podesta Group, and former Representative Win Weber, a top lobbyist at Mercury, knew that former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych was directing Manafort's and Gates' work. FARA requires lobbyists working under the direction or control of a foreign government to register. Documents also show that Kamala Harris got donations from people involved with Herbalife. Kamala Harris also refused to prosecute PG&E for its massive gas pipeline explosion. PG&E, you might recall, is now being investigated once again for causing one of the largest wildfires in California a couple months back. I don't know if you guys remember that. 8 years ago, federal investigators announced that a litany of failures by California's largest utility had caused a massive gas explosion that killed 8 people, injured 58, and incinerated a neighborhood in San Francisco, suburb of San Bruno. 2 days after that announcement, under blue skies at a baseball diamond, the city's mayor, Ed Lee, threw out the first pitch at the charity event sponsored by that same utility, Pacific Gas and Electric. He said PG&E is a great local company who gets it. Kamala Harris was asked to bring charges against the utility when she was the Attorney General in California, but apparently they just blew them off, according to the lawyer who represented San Bruno after the pipeline explosion. Anyway, holy shit. I'm going to throw up. Okay, that's it. We got through that. All right, Raj, what do you want to talk about? So